Hey everyone, welcome back to our Palace Papers read along. In today's episode, we explore Chapter 5, A Question of Independence, How Elizabeth and Philip Made It Work. Today, we move away from palace politics and into the most private domain of all, marriage. But not just any marriage, the one that defined the modern monarchy, Elizabeth and Philip. This chapter doesn't just give us insight into their love, it's a masterclass in how two very different people made it work under impossible public pressure. Let's jump in. It began in 1953 in the rustling, ermine silence of her coronation as Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey. The 31-year-old Philip Mountbatten, Duke of Edinburgh, removed his own coronet, knelt at the feet of the young woman he'd wed 6 years before, and swore an oath of allegiance. I, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, do become your liege man of life and limb and of earthly worship. So help me God. That Philip kept that oath for the next 68 years, and the Queen found a way to make him want to, is a miracle not only of the modern monarchy, but also of modern matrimony. So I feel like we don't talk enough about just how symbolic that moment was. Philip didn't just promise to obey, he physically kneeled. And for a man like him, an alpha, war hero, fiercely proud, that wasn't just ritual. It was a real act of surrender. Voluntary, but definitely not easy. No battle was either more painful or more public for Philip than the question of his children's surname. I am the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his children, he famously exploded. I'm nothing but a bloody amoeba. Marital conflict over the matter continued, bringing the Queen close to tears, said the conservative politician R.A. Rab Butler. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan recorded, "What upsets me is the prince's almost brutal attitude to the Queen over all this." I think this excerpt hits like a gut punch. You can feel how much it meant to Philip and how isolated he felt. And it's wild that behind those perfect palace walls, they were having the same fights as regular couples, just on a royal stage. With her customary quiet savvy, the Queen found sly ways to manage her husband while she got on with weighty matters of state. She put Philip in total charge of all the royal estates and houses, which he oversaw, as the Queen Mother put it sourly, like a German junker. Accepting that he was shut out of her red box life, Philip threw himself into a blizzard of charity chairmanships. I think this was Elizabeth at her most strategic. She couldn't change the hierarchy of state, but she gave Philip a kingdom of his own, estates, architecture, conservation causes. It was a trade, and honestly, a smart one. Philip's rumored, but vigorously denied, infidelities may well have been the only way such a hard-charging, red-blooded husband could assert his masculine autonomy amidst the frustrations of fealty. He was lucky to have been born into an age more protective of the monarchy's penumbral spaces. When my late husband, Sir Harold Evans, became editor of the Sunday Times, he was warned to be careful of how the paper reported on Prince Philip, because his private life was of interest to MI6. Okay, this one's messy. I don't think we'll ever know the full story about Philip's rumored affairs, but what's clear is that the Queen wasn't naive. She just chose stability over scandal, which, that says a lot about both of them. More often than not, his sporting companion for the last 25 years of his life was Lady Penelope Romsey, a tall, slender blonde, 31 years his junior. Penny became the Countess Mountbatten in 2017. As a longtime family friend, Philip is said to have made the suggestion she learn to carriage drive, as a distraction from grief after the death of her 5-year-old daughter in 1991. Whatever the evolution of their friendship, Romsey possessed the beauty, poise, and sense of humor to hold Philip's attention for longer than anyone else except his wife. The Queen's response was to invite her to travel in the car with her to church on Sunday, and they were photographed chatting amicably. The Queen seems to have decided that Romsey was necessary for her husband's good humor. Philip likes to have her around. I think this really shows the Queen's quiet pragmatism. She understood that Philip had needs, emotional, maybe even romantic, that weren't necessarily a threat. She didn't react like a regular wife. She managed the situation as a monarch with countries to rule. A former member of the Queen's staff told me that, in his 90s, Philip asked, "Do you want some marriage advice? Spend enough time apart and make sure you don't have all the same interests." So, I feel like that's the secret to this whole chapter. The Queen and Philip weren't codependent. They gave each other space to be whole humans, not just public figures. It wasn't cold, it was practical. The nightmarish scenes of the terrorist attacks coincided with a phone call bringing the Queen devastating personal news. The 77-year-old Earl of Carnarvon, Porchey, had suffered a fatal heart attack at Highclere Castle. His wife said that Carnarvon, too, had been watching the coverage of the attacks. He became agitated and collapsed, dying in the ambulance. Once again, as with the death of Diana, the magical remoteness of Balmoral was pierced by inescapable human pain. The Queen was not there, but Prime Minister Tony Blair read a moving passage. Among the weeping congregation, Bill Clinton, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and Secretary General Kofi Annan were visibly moved. Usually the eloquence of Blair wins the hour, but it was the Queen who expressed the most memorable thought. Grief is the price we pay for love. I think that's one of the most quietly devastating sentences she's ever spoken. Grief is the price we pay for love. It landed because it wasn't abstract. It wasn't political. That sentence was raw. Because in that moment, she wasn't just addressing the horror unfolding in New York, she was also mourning her best friend of 60 years. Dogs are one of her few areas of visible sentiment. On the death of one of Her Majesty's favorite corgis, Lady Pamela Hicks sent her a sympathy note and received a 6-page letter back from the Queen. It was especially notable given that when Pamela's father, Earl Mountbatten, was murdered by the IRA, neither she nor her sister received a personal letter of condolence from the Queen. A dog isn't important, so she can express the really deep feelings she can't get out otherwise, Lady Pamela suggested, but it's more likely the opposite is true. Dogs and horses are her true emotional peers. They have no interest in her rank, love her for herself, and never bore her by asking what Winston Churchill was really like. I love this passage. I think it tells us more about the Queen's inner world than most biographies ever do. She grew up in a life where emotions had to be armored. But animals? Animals don't require small talk. They don't need diplomacy, they just are. And maybe that's why, in a world of constant scrutiny, it's only in the presence of her dogs and horses that she ever truly let her guard down. So what did we learn? Behind the pearls and pomp, the Queen and Philip had a marriage built on constant compromise. She gave him space to roam, and he gave her unwavering loyalty. They made it work because neither of them ever expected it to be easy. That's all for today's episode. Stick around because the next one takes us from the private to the political. More power plays, more family drama, and a whole new chapter in the Palace Papers saga.